Good, good. Yeah, I wish I could say I was going to say I should take a selfie, but there's nobody to take a selfie. That's okay. That's okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again for having me, Kasim. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me present. I'm really, really excited. So yeah, I am a data and AI cloud solution architect for Microsoft, and I work in the education sector and help customers a lot with implementing different data technologies. And one of the ones that I've been working with a lot lately, a lot of customers are asking about, is Purview. So we are going to talk about Purview. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to skip through the me spiel slide. I've been at Microsoft for about 7 years, former MVP and all of that, but I know we got a condensed, this normally was an hour presentation, so I'm going to condense it and feel free to, I know it's a little difficult now in our format to have interactivity, but feel free if it's possible from your guys' side to ask questions along the way. So, all right, so this is the agenda. I'm going to do a brief overview of how you would get Purview started, how you would get it going for in my example, I'm going to go through like a SQL server in your data center in your private network, and then talk about some of the surprises that I ran into helping implement Purview. So, all right. So data, I always say, is messy, ugly, and it lives all over the place. And it's hard to wrangle. I remember when I was a SQL DBA, I was more, I was administering the databases and worried about protecting the databases. But a lot of times I had no idea what people were inserting into those databases and had to give a lot of trust to those folks. So some of the challenges that are faced with data is, understanding where all it lives and making it discoverable. I can't imagine how much rework is done because someone didn't realize a view already existed or a stored procedure or those kind of simple things. Even just kind of thinking about SQL Server. For a long time, there wasn't a good story around Microsoft helping to address some of these challenges, but now there is Purview. So data governance is hard, and it involves a lot of humans, and those are a lot of times the tricky part, but we do have a technology. So just because we have the technology doesn't mean your data governance woes are all alleviated. And if anybody's telling you that, they're probably in sales and wanting you to purchase it a little bit more than they should. Data governance is still hard, but this definitely helps. So Purview is a PaaS service for data governance. It's along the lines of those products that Microsoft has. If you pay for what you use, what you scan, you're going to scan your data sources and build a data map. So the foundation of Purview is that data map, and there are also some different things you can use to enhance it. There's data insights. I'll show you that a little bit. And that is really geared for kind of chief data officers to have that bird's eye view across the landscape of how the data governance process is going, what all data are we finding out there, and the nature of it. And then I mentioned also the discoverability is something that's important to data governance, so people don't keep building all these silos out there, is the data catalog, being able to query the data. And also something that's really interesting is being able to tie it to the language of your business. Microsoft is really bad about having acronyms. You can potentially store those acronyms and make them and tie them to the data assets and make that discoverable. So really powerful stuff. But I'm a very learn by doing kind of a gal, so I'm going to talk about how we get Purview going through while we look at the tool. So jump over to there we go. So over here, one of the first things you're going to do is set up a Purview account in Azure. And before I there has been a renaming of Purview fairly recently where it's Microsoft Purview. If you hear me slip into calling it Azure Purview, it's just a bad habit. It's now Microsoft Purview, and it's kind of crossing streams with Microsoft's 365 Compliance Center. They're still kind of separate tools, but those tools will become more one as things go along. So that was the purpose for the renaming and telling people where things are going. So one of the first things you do to get Purview going is set up in Azure your Microsoft Purview account. Once you do that, if you click into here, it will bring up this pane, which is kind of a similar look and feel to a lot of our products. But I'm gonna come back to the catalog. This is kind of where you can land and do your queries across your data. But let's first talk about what we need to get next set up to scan a SQL Server on-prem. So we've set up our account. We also need to set up something called a self-hosted integration runtime. And I always click there because it's where it is in Synapse, but it's not there. So the self-hosted integration runtime, anything that's Microsoft related that has to reach into private networks more than likely has something similar to this. The self-hosted integration runtime is used with things like Synapse and Data Factory. It's to be able to, you're going to set up in your environment close to that SQL server. It doesn't have to live on the same machine, but you're going to want to set up just one machine that can talk to your private network on-prem SQL server. So this one is not turned on. I won't be able to scan anything, but you can see this is where you would set that up. First, you're going to install something close to your machine. If you're familiar with Power BI and the on-premises data gateway, it's a very similar product, so similar. Do not install those things on the same machines. The code base is very similar and it can tromp on each other. So set up your self-hosted integration runtime, and that's going to be that private outbound only connectivity to be able to talk to Azure from your on-prem SQL and get that data from your on-prem SQL server. So we set up our self-hosted integration runtime. Then you're going to need to set up, there's a managed service identity that's set up with Purview, essentially kind of the service account for Purview. You're going to want to set that up with access to your data resources. Once you set up, so in your SQL server, you're going to need to set up DB data reader rights for Purview to be able to read and scan that SQL server. It's going to need DB data reader across your master database. It doesn't need admin, it doesn't need any of those things, but it will need to read to interrogate the different databases and get some of that system related view information from the master database. So just be aware of that. And you might have to ease your DBA into that conversation. They don't like giving access to the master database, but it is needed. And they'll be happy that you don't need admin. But yeah, so you're going to need to set up a connectivity for Purview to talk to your SQL server. And you're going to also need to set up a key vault connection to hold those credentials. I do like that they force you to do that to make things more secure. So you're going to need to set in your key vault your credentials to connect to your SQL Server on-prem database. Once you have that, then you can kind of get started inside of Purview. And what I'm showing you here is a collection. When you first build Purview, it's only going to have kind of this root collection. You need to think about how you're going to organize your metadata and serve it out to the people you want to give access to. So the hierarchy structure here, the rights can flow down. So you can see here, I have a few different data sources set in prod, because yeah, everybody works in prod. I'm starting with production on my scanning. So I set up my data sources and I put them in this prod collection so I can then have a trickle down effect and populate the data to the people that can see it in these different collections. You can, so in the collections here, I'll show you, this is where you can set different roles and different rights and have that trickle down effect. So if I set somebody at department level, by default, they'll have access to the agriculture department, but I can restrict that inheritance as well. So, and you can see here, there are various different rights you can give. You can tell what kind of TV I'm watching when I set up my demos. So Ted Lasso is a data curator in my Purview environment. Heinz Doofenshmirtz, he can't be trusted to do anything other than read. So he has data reader, and Steve Rogers, Captain America, also has data reader as rights. He's a pretty trustworthy guy. I might rethink his rights and give him some higher level rights, but he can also read this as well. So you want to think about that. And something too, you set up your data source once, but you can set up, so for in our example, the SQL server that we set up, we can dole out different pieces to it, to these different collections that we have. So I might have, excuse me, a database that I only want the people at the agriculture department to see, and I can scan and serve the data, the metadata up in the data map to these different collections at different pieces and parts of them. So let me show you too, when you set up, so the next thing we're going to do is essentially set up our scans. And I'm showing you here, classifications are the things I can potentially kind of scour my data landscape for. There's a lot of different, we're a global company. So let's see here. Trying to see if there's any, I was just seeing if there was anything Nigerian specific. I'm not seeing anything, but you get the gist of this. These are, I might not want to look for Hong Kong identity card numbers in my data set if I'm kind of a US only based company. So you can set up customized classifications as well. If you have kind of, for example, I help customers with like student IDs a lot of times. If that has a pattern and I want to scan my environment for those, I can set that up. But this is the classification rules. So if I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to set up a scan rule set. So when you set up a scan, it's going to depend on what type of data you're scanning, but we can set up, let's pretend we're going to do that SQL server again. I can call this whatever I'd like. We'll call this Nigeria. And I'm going to say continue. So these are these different classification rules. I don't necessarily want to scan for everything. This is a cost implication as well. The more you scan for across your environment, kind of the more it's going to have to churn, and you're going to have a cost implication. Pricing is based on what you scan, how much you scan, how often you scan. So this can be a factor, and definitely don't scan for things that you don't necessarily care about. So I'll skip through that, but you can see here, you can pick and choose what you scan for. So I always recommend that folks, because more than likely you don't want to necessarily scan your entire environment for everything. Maybe you do, but I always tell people you want to set up a custom scan set and scan for what you care about. You can take the defaults kind of for what Microsoft has, but just wanted to mention that. So now we have our scan set, and we can scan our data, and we can schedule those scans and populate those different that different org structure for this. So then once you have your data scanned, then it is searchable. So let's do. I was working with a precision agriculture professor one time, and I really enjoyed his data. I was helping him, and we used some of his data. So you can see here, I just searched for cow in my environment. I have different collections where cow shows up. I also have something that comes from the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. What it used to be is now called Purview as well. This is where you can set your sensitivity labels in your environment. Microsoft has like highly confidential, organizational, and public. For example, I did mine super top secret, just so you can know this is something that you set yourself. I've seen people have varying colors for their data labels. Red data is the restricted data. So it's up to you on the sensitivity labels. Once you set those up, those can flow through into Purview as well and allow you to keep an eye on your super top secret stuff if that's your sensitivity labeling. I also have in here some assigned terms. So you can see here I have bovine. That is a glossary term that I set up and tied to some of the data assets. So you can see here I have some of that data that is the glossary term that I set up is tied to the data as well. So, okay. So I want to make sure I get to some of the lessons. I'm trying to make sure I know I have just like a little less than 20 minutes. So I want to make sure I get to showing you that, but I wanted to kind of talk through super quickly, super high level of how you would get it going. Let me jump back to the slides. In the slides, there's kind of a recap because I know I definitely went through a little bit faster with you guys as well. So, but I always feel like the big elephant in the room when I talk to customers is how much is this going to cost? And usually they want to punch me in the face because it depends with a lot of PaaS, the PaaS data services have that aspect to them. Purview does as well. Like I said, you have different factors based on what you scan, how much you scan. You also have some costs based on your usage. As more people start to use it and find benefit in it, that also impacts costs. But I want to show you somewhere to anytime there are buttons in any of the products where cost is a factor based on turning things on or off. I want to make sure people know about it. So these particular features are ways to impact your cost. You can pay for something called advanced resource sets. If you have a deep and wide data lake, for example, you can get more information. You can see on partition data. Turn it on if you'd like. If you turn it on, there is a cost implication to that. Data estate insights, which let me jump over here and show you this really, really quickly. This is what data estate insights is. This is chief data officers and folks that are of that particular, care about the data and compliance and those things. This really is this is where their eyes light up when I talk to them. So you can see here, this is kind of a bird's eye view of what's going on in my data environment. You can see there's metrics on adoption, also by data set types. This is by collection. I don't have too many collections, but I do have a lot of different types of data in my Purview environment. I can see, file types and different things, how many glossary terms have been created but not tied to something. So classifications and then also sensitivity labels. But I want to make sure this is turned on by default. And I just want to make sure people are aware there is a button here. If you're cost minded and you're kind of kicking the tires, go turn these off if you're not ready for using that data estate insights. You can always come and turn it back on later. You can also change the refresh frequency as well. So if you wanted to let it run, capture some data, and then turn off the refresh for it, you can do that as well. Just make sure if you turn it all the way off, that view that I showed kind of goes away. If you just turn off the refresh, it may have run and it may have stale data, but you still get access to that dashboard. It won't be kind of a blank situation for you. So, okay. I'm going to pause because I talked a bit and I want to make sure I give you guys time for questions. I know we were a little late. Is there any questions in the room? And I know it seems like this is on mute. I'm open to questions. Please ask them. So, okay, I'm going to keep going and keep talking until somebody kicks me out of this room. All right. So let me jump back to the slides here, but I always want to make sure.
I think we do have a question here. Yeah.
So quickly, I just want to confirm, is the Microsoft Purview, is it different or has it replaced Azure Information Protection?
That is a good question. I don't think, and the information protection, no. Even that and kind of the compliance center, they're still separate entities. You still kind of have to, there are crossing points in the tools where things are kind of meeting, but no, they're not replacing. Nothing is replaced yet. And I feel like that's one of those ones where the naming has been different. So no, there's still kind of different places you can get to Purview, and the compliance center, for example, is now called Purview in the M365, but you still kind of have those separate places for administration for now, but they eventually down the road, I think there will be more of a coming together of them. Thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Sure. Good deal. All right. So one quick lesson that I wanted to share with everyone that was a little bit surprising. So when I was back here, so when I started setting up, especially some of the preview features, I just wanted to call out, and I'm going to skim over this piece quite a bit. There are different caveats that I ran into. For example, I'll just kind of call them out in an example. There were some, if you ever see in our documentation, blue boxes, even though the color is very benign and it doesn't kind of jump out at you as, hey, I should pay attention to this, pay attention to those blue boxes. They hold a lot of caveats, at least on the Purview side. One caveat that I ran into, for example, was the lineage. And this wasn't necessarily in a blue box. It was only in an asterisk. One thing with Purview, and let me actually show this. So let's go back to our cow example. One thing that is really cool inside of Purview is different things can show, especially our ETL kind of tools, Data Factory, Synapse has pipelines. A lot of those will show lineage. Lineage has a lot of asterisks. I'm sure there will be more, but things like if I have a pipeline in Synapse that the source is based on a query and not a just straight table, that won't show lineage. So if you start scanning things and you're expecting lineage, you want to go back to the documentation. I have a link in here for that specific data source and check. There's a really big kind of table that shows which things have lineage and which things do not. They're adding more and more all the time. Purview is still pretty new. So just be aware of that. There are other things as well, like data use management. So for things like data policies, which I'm going to get into in just a second, things like you have to enable something in your subscription before you can use it with your storage account. So it's only going to be allowed for storage accounts that are created after you use this PowerShell command to flip the switch for that data use management. Just be aware that is there. Okay. One thing I definitely want to make sure I cover with you all, because this when I presented in Atlanta, this started to freak people out a little bit, especially if you're a DBA. Make sure to stop going through your grocery list in your head and listen here. So within Purview, to here, come on. Okay. There's something called data policies. So let's pretend like we're going to create a new one. I can set allow, I can set read rights for, and the list of the sources is pretty small right now. But if I have an Azure SQL database, and then I have this Azure SQL database, I can set data policies for certain data sources within Purview. So this is definitely getting into the governance and allow, one tool to kind of situation where we can assign rights to the sources as well. So I have one already. You can see here, this is allowing read to a group called Trustworthy Peeps in my environment. So I set this up on my SQL server, and from my DBA days, I wanted to go see on the source, hey, where do those Trustworthy Peeps show up? So I have here, this is my, I'm connected to that database. And you can see here, so this is the database principals and servers. There is no Trustworthy Peeps to be found. I was like, huh, all right. So it doesn't show up in the logins. It doesn't show in the users area. I started to wonder, where can I see this? So if I scroll down on this query, and this is a link where you can get to these DMVs. It's also going to be in the slides here. But if I select from here, these SysDM external policy role members, you can see here, this is an Azure Active Directory object ID, and we can look this up over here if we'd like to. I'll go over here. We can go into Azure Active Directory. Right now, you kind of have to go back into Azure. You can see here, this is my Trustworthy Peeps group. That is who has been granted access. But I have to kind of follow the breadcrumb trails a little bit, and I have to look in different places. If you have auditing and things that, auditing reports and things like that, you might need to add to them if you start using Purview data policies. They are in preview, so just want to give that preview caveat. But I wanted to make sure that I definitely want to make sure people are aware that you might need to look in different places for where my users that have been granted access through Purview come from. So, and these are a few different of those DMVs. So they do show up. I will give a caveat too, again, in preview, and I hope this might be why it's still in preview, is that if you do storage accounts, if you grant rights from storage accounts in Purview right now, there isn't a way yet to be able to see from the storage side people that have been granted access. So you would have to come into Purview to see who's been granted access to your storage account. That's a big red flashing thing I want to make sure people are aware of. So, anybody freaked out over there? It's hard to tell. So definitely something that was kind of surprising, and I wanted to make sure I kind of added. This was one of the lessons learned that I thought, oh, people need to know that this is how this is. So okay, so I ran through that pretty quick, and I gave 4 minutes for questions. I'm feeling pretty proud of myself, but I went through things fast. Please let me know if that did not make sense.
Hello, Hope.
Hi.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, so did it make sense? Yes, it did, Hope. Thank you. Do we have questions? Okay. All right. So we're good. Hope, did you plug in your socials?
Oh, I have them here, actually. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm really, really excited to be a part of this.
Hasim says hello. Hasim is here.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, yeah. It's a bit earlier where I am, but I'm glad to be up and presenting for you all. So I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right.
And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or I can help answer
Okay.
anything.
Oh, okay. Though they're asking if there's a chance that they could get their hands on the presentation slides.
Yep, I'm gonna actually send them to. Is that you, Kazim, talking?
Yeah, that's me speaking.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna send them to you since you're the meeting organizer. I'll just reply to the meeting invite and get these to you. I'll do that now before I forget.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I hope the conference goes well. Thank you all.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.